All right, Gwen, thanks for being here with me today.
I am so happy that you invited me to join you.
Awesome. Well, I am excited for our conversation today. I was reading over your website before our call, and you have this line that successful businesses are secretly running you into the ground. This really resonated with me, both in my own experience and what I've seen from people that I work with, where they have this really polished, professional, awesome online presence, and you're like, they are rocking it, and then they are, but then you see the inside and they're struggling more than you ever expected.
It's an interesting problem because they don't want you don't want to raise your hand and say, "Yes, my very successful business is killing me." Right?
Yes.
Because the thing is, and I think this is more of a female problem than a male problem. I'm definitely generalizing here, but we also don't want to look ungrateful for our success, right? So we
Mm,
don't actually want to say, yeah, this whole thing that looks amazing over here just angers me, tires me, pisses me off, overwhelms me. Whatever that kind of negative, hard, exhausted, whatever emotion that comes with it, because we don't want to seem like we're ungrateful for this amazing thing that we've created,
yeah.
right? And and so it's like we don't actually say it's like, yeah, but this thing's not doing what I want it to do, or it's not feeling successful to me. Because that's really the phrase that I've found really works with a lot of people is like it looks successful and it is
Mhm.
successful, but it doesn't feel successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to kind of question at a certain point, what does successful mean to me? And what am I actually trying to do here?
Well, and that's one of the big things that I focus on when I'm working with my clients. And it's one of the very first things that we talk about is working through the process of defining what does success really mean to you? Not what does society say success is, not even what
Yeah.
your family says success is, definitely not what social media says success is,
Hmm.
right? But your culture, all of those things have taught you what success is supposed to mean,
Yeah.
but rarely does that actually resonate with our own soul. I mean, there's probably
No.
elements that do, but rarely is that the thing that really resonates with our soul. And so we're often afraid to say, yeah, no, what actually will be successful for me is, fill in whatever the blank is, if it doesn't conform with kind of the norms that are out there. But
Mhm.
if we can get you to what does success really mean to me, then it's so much easier to design the business to be successful in that way,
Mhm.
whatever that means to you. And it can still look successful on the outside, but a lot of times it's not doing the same things that you were planning on doing. I
Yeah.
had a client years ago who's like, when I started asking her about what is success going to look like, she's like, I want a 9-figure business. Okay, 9-figure, that is a giant, giant business.
Hmm.
And as I kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing over time, because she wasn't really doing the things that was going to make for a 9-figure business. And so I kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And what we finally got to was that all of her previous jobs had been in these, $100 million, $500 million,
Mm,
billion-dollar firms. And so she assumed that if she wasn't doing that, she wasn't successful.
yeah.
And it was like, but she also didn't want to have to manage anybody. It's like,
Hmm.
I don't think you get to 9 figures without having to manage some people along the way. you know.
Yeah.
So we got to what does success really mean to her, and that was a completely different thing. It was like a high 6-figure business. I mean, like this is
Oh, yeah.
completely different. And so once we went through that process and really identified, it was like, oh, well, this is what real success actually means to you.
I love that. Yeah.
Right.
And then
And so
things
and so
align.
let's design the business to do that.
Hmm.
And we were able to do that. Right.
Hmm. That's so great. I saw something on your website talking about the building a business without intention. And this isn't something that we don't set out to do that. That doesn't happen on purpose, but you're building a business, you're doing the things you're supposed to do, and it kind of grows in ways that you never expected. And then you're here all of a sudden, and you kind of look around, and you're like, did I mean to come here? Where am I going? And so, building a business with intention, and whether it's at the beginning or we get to stop at some point and take a breath and have someone like you to put us through this process to say, right, what do I want and what am I trying to achieve here? I think that's just so important.
Well, and actually, I have my water can that actually says every business works exactly as it designed, but very few are designed with intention. And that's the thing is we get the exact results that we have designed it for,
Yeah.
but we often don't design it with that in mind, right? It's usually and when I say designing the business, I'm generally talking about all the back end stuff. Usually our product and our marketing and all of that is very well intentioned, and we think
Mm-hmm.
through a lot of that, especially at the beginning. We want to make sure that we're bringing in the right people and we're sending the right message, and all of that's being portrayed, but we forget that that also needs to happen on the backside of our business too.
Mm-hmm.
And most of what happens on the backside is reactive, especially when we're first starting out. And it's the way every business is. Even my business, when I first started, was also reactive, even though this is what I do for a living, because it's the nature of it. We
Yeah.
just solve the problem, and that becomes the way that we deal with it, and then we move on. But once you get to that, what I'm going to call that early stage of success, is when you can actually say, okay, is this producing the results? And not just the obvious financial business results, but the business environment, the business experience that I want to experience. Is that
Mm-hmm.
the way that I want to experience it? Is that my definition of success?
Mm-hmm.
And most of that can be redesigned on the back end. Usually you don't have to change your marketing or your product or any of the rest of it. Sometimes there's some little tweaks there, but usually it's not big. But it's usually on the place that no one's looking because they think,
Mm-hmm.
well, but this is the way I have to run the business because this is the way I run the business.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, there's actually a lot of options that you can and choices that you can make, most of which you aren't aware of because you haven't had the experience to know that those options exist.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And no matter how successful the external pieces are, if you don't get that internal piece under control, at some point you're going to burn out. None of that success is going to be able to stand up.
Right.
Yeah.
The burnout is real, and it isn't about I'm not doing what I love. People will say, "Oh, I'm getting burned out," and it's like, but are you not doing what you love? No. Most of the time they're still actually they love their business, they love their product, but they attach it to that. And it's like, no, that's not what actually it is. It's that your business is functioning in a way that you don't love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
we can and 99% of the time we can fix that. That's the thing, is it can be fixed without burning it all down. When we my marketing person and I started a podcast um not quite a year ago, and part of the reason we did is because people were saying, oh, I'm burnt, I had all of the success and then I burned my business down because I hated it. And it was like, you didn't actually have to burn it down.
Yeah.
You didn't have to. We could have redesigned it. We may have burned a few pieces down. We may have been very selective in some deconstruction,
Yeah.
but you didn't have to burn the whole thing down. You didn't have to
Mm-mm.
to lose it all. Um, and you also don't have to get your business to that point. You can be making much better decisions much, much, much earlier on in the
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. I get a lot of people that come to me initially in the phase before the complete burnout and the burning down, where they're just disheartened and exhausted, and they're like, I just don't know what to do. And I think we talked a little bit how this really polished external present, the external success of other people can make you feel like you're the only one that's falling apart. You see all of this and you're like, oh my gosh, they've got their stuff together, they're rocking it. Those people behind the curtain are often in the same position as you, but you never get to see that, and it feels really feels like it's just you.
Yeah, the self-talk that we do, particularly when we start the comparison game, is such a lie. Because the first thing is, we don't know all of the pieces. There is no way that we can know all of the pieces unless they really are our best friend and we are hanging out with them all the time and we're over at their house and they're over at our house. And, I mean, like, not just the business, but like truly knowing all of the pieces, because all of the pieces actually play into the equation, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big element of it. And you can't. And so one of the phrases that we use a lot in our organization is context matters. And so when you see somebody and you say, oh, they've got it all together, they've got the answer, they're getting, all of these things, it's like, but are they?
Hmm.
But are they? Are they really? There's probably elements of what you're saying that is true, but there's also some things that you're assuming are working beautifully for them because maybe that part's really easy for you. So it's like, oh, they must be really just rocking that part too, because this part's really easy. Obviously, because it's easy for me, it must be easy for everybody.
Hmm.
Not true, not true, not true.
Yeah.
Um, and and that's maybe the place that they're completely failing. But the place that you're sure that they're succeeding and that you're a failure, maybe that's their easy thing. Maybe that's the
Hmm.
thing that's really, really easy for them. But one of the things that we do with our clients is we have a quarterly planning process, and clients from our earliest stage clients and our most entry level program to my private clients that I'm working with teams. So it's, a full range, and that means stage levels of business, income levels of business. I mean, this is a big, big, broad range of folks. They all show up in the room together and we go through the planning process. And part of that is some small group conversation. And every single solitary time that someone new comes into the group, they are always shocked at how everyone, to some degree or another, is dealing with the exact same thing, regardless of how successful they are by
Hmm.
whatever definition of success that they're using in their head.
Yeah.
That we're all dealing with some variation of it. It may be a bigger variation or a smaller variation, but we're all dealing with issues. And some of the things that it's like, well, that's a really easy problem to solve. When you say that, they're like, that's a great idea. I never thought of that. It's like, how would you not think of that? You're super successful. And it's like, because we all have different gifts, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we all have different gifts and sometimes we're just not even looking at that part of it. Like you said, we're focused on the marketing and all of that. So, yeah. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the issues that they are facing, but I want to kind of expand on that area. So when someone comes to you, what would be the things that you would identify, they're all kind of experiencing these issues and that is where they kind of need me to be able to walk them through this process?
So the thing that I'm actually providing, I call myself a business advisor, and recently I was reading a book and it became really clear to me why that word is even more accurate than I thought it was. And in this book, the gentleman is talking about that every business needs a board of advisors, an advisory
Hmm.
board, a board of directors, and he's talking about that role. And the reality is, businesses that are under usually probably eight figures don't actually need a traditional board of advisors, right? Or a board, right? Because they
Hmm.
just can't afford it to have folks that's what their job is. But the reality is every business at every level needs that, because what the job of a board of advisors is to hold you truly accountable, okay? Not just saying, did you do the thing, but real accountability is a back and forth. It's an interaction. It takes a second person. You can't be self-accountable. That's not really a thing. Um, they need to be able to ask you really hard questions that you aren't going to ask yourself because, well,
Yeah.
they're hard, and so you don't want to. Right? And and they need to provide an outside perspective, which also you can't do yourself.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't I can't do it. I do it for everybody else. I cannot do it for me. It's impossible. It's the nature of it, right? And that's really what I'm providing my clients, is I'm like a board of advisors of one,
Hmm.
that coming in and giving them real accountability. And my most entry level product is really an accountability product that is a true accountability in a way that most people haven't experienced it. And as part of that, I will ask hard questions and I provide outside perspective. And so a lot of folks are like, oh, I can't afford to work with someone like Gwen one-on-one. And it's like, maybe you can't, because early stage, you probably can't afford me. I couldn't afford me when I was early stage.
Yeah.
I totally get that. But there are options to be able to start getting that through the process. And that's really what I'm doing. But the first piece is to be really clear on, what does real success mean to you?
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
always the first piece that I focus on. I have a process that I take all of my clients through called the 5-3-1, which really is about, what does real success actually mean to you? And we don't always really get there, because there's a lot of unlearning that has to happen, but we
So
usually make
yeah,
some pretty good strides
that's great.
to get there first. And then based on what that answer is, that's when we decide what is our next step.
Yeah, I liked in your example earlier when you were talking about the nine-figure example. It took a while of kind of repeating and asking this question to really get at the truth. And I love the idea of unlearning is such an important concept to kind of bring into everything we're doing in business. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah, because we see so many things out in the world, either because we're watching somebody else and saying, "Oh, that must be how I achieve success. If I do what they did, I'll get that same level of success." We're watching it on social media. We're doing all of those things, and it may or may not be true for you,
Hmm.
right? Because there's a lot of variables that go into all of these things. Back to context matters. What is your context? Where will all of these things fall? And when we get too concerned about what everybody else is doing, we forget about what actually matters to us.
Yeah. Absolutely. So when you are able to find that clarity with a client where they have identified what success means to them and they can step into it, what is the transformation that you see for their experience and for their business?
So one of the clients that I that I've had on and off, that's one of the things that will happen with my clients, is they'll work with me for a while, then they'll stop and they'll come back.
Yep.
And so she's someone I adore all my clients. I was gonna say she's someone I adore, but I adore all my clients. So that's not actually a very clarifying thing. But she was an attorney, is an attorney, not was, but is an attorney. And attorneys typically assume that being the best attorney is being a litigator, because that's what we see on TV, right? The
Hmm.
strongest, best, most valuable attorneys are always litigators. That's always the big, that's the big thing. And she's also one of the nicest, kindest, most sensitive, loving people that I have ever met. That also does not describe litigator to me. Right? I mean, because litigators are hard and they're tough and they're, doing all of these things. And so when we started working together, her goal was to be the very best litigator in the state. And and known for that. And I was like, and I told her, I said, I don't think that's right. It's like, I don't think that's the right answer for you. She's like, no, no, no. I know that's what I need to be. But she also was bringing in a whole lot of cultural stuff. She was first generation here in the United States. She was the first one to go to college, let alone go on to get a master's and her law degree. I mean, like, you know, there
Yeah.
there was a lot of firsts there, so there was a lot of pressure to meet the standard. But over time, as we worked together, what we got to is what she really wanted was to serve her clientele in a really useful way, to be able to be there for her children. She had two young children, grade school children, to be able to be there for her children and to be able to travel when and where and kind of how she wanted to.
Hmm.
And as we went through this, what we discovered is what she is doing now is she focuses on estate planning, trusts, all of those kinds of things, which means you need to be caring, you need to be sensitive, right? It's like as this became an option for her in her mind, it was like, oh, this
Yeah.
lines up, right? And on top of it, she works primarily with clientele that are also from her parents' country of origin. So, because she's a native language speaker, right?
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with that kind of stuff, you don't want to have to be trying to come up with the right English words,
Yeah.
right? I mean, these are hard, sometimes hard conversations, right? And so they're able to talk with her in their native language. So she has this beautiful niche that lines up so perfectly with, her who she is and her who her life is. And I remember the first time she and I talked after we stopped working, after a period of time, she said, I love my life. I love going to work every day. I love everything about my life. And before we started working together, I never believed that was ever going to be true. I hated what I did. I hated how I had to do it. I was miserable all the time. And there were no words that would have ever convinced me that I could feel this way.
Wow. That's a
And
big difference. Yeah.
and she started making better money in her business on top of it.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Like that's like just like a side thing, right? Because
Yeah.
that's not actually what I care about.
Yeah.
But she was more, she was more profitable in the
Hmm.
process,
That's so great.
right?
I,
So,
I,
I love that's one of my favorite stories, but
uh-huh.
I get that from almost all my clients.
That's so good. Yeah. I love that story because the definition of success that she brought forward, it's not just about making money, right?
No.
That tends to be on our minds as like, what do we want our business to do? That's what success looks like. But success always has life in it. And once you're bringing that into the question in the first place, you get to create that. You're helping people not only create a more successful business, but in a sustainable business that they can keep going with, but create the life that they want, to spend time with their family, to travel, to do the things they want to do. And that's so life giving.
Yeah, and so, I watch her and she travels a ton. She spends a ton of time with her kids. I see all of this and I know all of this is happening and it continues. And she loves all of her clients. She doesn't, it used to be it's like, oh, I've got to deal with this client. It's like she doesn't have that anymore,
Yeah,
because she's doing things that are so in line with who she is and in line with what success looks like for her right now in this place and time.
I love that. That's great. That's great for your clients. And I can see that's great for you doing what you enjoy and
Oh
loving
yeah,
your
no, I,
clients
I
as
love it.
well.
Yeah.
So great. Well, thank you so much for sharing about all of that, Gwen. I appreciate it.
I am so grateful that we were able to have this conversation. I'm so glad you invited me to be on your podcast.
Absolutely. Great to have you.